So hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Family Insurance DreamBank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. I'm Jenna, and on behalf of DreamBank, we're thrilled to have you with us for today's event. For those who have attended our virtual or in-person events in the past, welcome back. For anyone that is joining us for the first time, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to DreamBank. Here at American Family Insurance, life's better when you're under our roof because when you feel totally supported and protected, any dream is possible. That's why we created DreamBank, an inspirational community destination and virtual experience designed to help people pursue, achieve, and protect their dreams. And now, I'm thrilled to introduce you to our speaker, Sandhya Sudhakar. Sandhya is a certified coach, Enneagram practitioner, speaker, facilitator, and founder of Self at Work and the host of the Working Your Way podcast. She takes a trauma-informed, inclusive approach to leadership development and team building, focused on showing up authentically and cultivating a sense of belonging in the workplace. Through Self at Work, Sandhya helps leaders build meaningful connections with themselves, their teams, and their work so that they can achieve success in a more sustainable way. Please join me in welcoming Sandhya. Thank you so much for being here, Sandhya. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I see a lot of folks from Madison, Minnesota, where I lived for about 7 years, and I am joining from a very chilly Chicago right now. So welcome, everybody. I'm excited to chat about this idea of pursuing purpose and how do we separate our identity and who we are from the work that we do. And I like to say that it's really all about not taking work so personally, but making it much more purposeful. So as children, we're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then as we get older, a lot of times the first thing that we ask each other is, what do you do for work? And somewhere along the line, our work becomes that thing that defines us. Now, I want you to think about the last time that you canceled plans with friends or family because maybe you were prepping for an important meeting, or maybe you skipped your workout or sacrificed a couple hours of sleep to try to get caught up on your to-do list, as if that's a thing that actually ever happens, right? At some point, work becomes the thing that we schedule our life around. And somehow we realize that we started to take work really personally. And because of this, we often let our passions and our hobbies become boxes of stuff that we tuck away in the back of the closet. And maybe we let our dreams become a 10-year plan that never makes it off the piece of paper that we wrote it on. But we're here at DreamBank, so we know that we believe in dreams in this space. And so today we're going to talk about why this happens and what we can do instead. As Jenna introduced me, I'm Sandhya Sudhakar, and I'm the founder of Self at Work, where I'm a leadership coach and a team consultant, and I'm the host of Working Your Way, a podcast dedicated to helping you navigate your career in a way that works for you. Every day in my business and on my podcast, I help people like you achieve your career dreams successfully. But here's the most important part about it. My mission is to make sure that you're doing it all in a sustainable way. It's not just about the goal that you want to accomplish or that destination, but for me, it's really about finding a process that gets you there in a way that aligns with how you best operate so that you can actually enjoy the journey along the way. So we're going to go back in time a little bit here to when I was little, and my family was gathered at my grandparents' house over the holidays. And I was asked that question that we started out with. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I loved school when I was little. I would even bring home extra worksheets in the summertime to do just for fun. And I also really loved being around little kids. And so when my family asked me, I was really excited to share. And I said, I want to be an elementary school teacher. And my grandmother looked at me with this concerned expression on her face. And she said, teachers don't make a lot of money. And in my head, I thought, okay, I need to make more money. Doctors make a lot of money. And I really do like kids. So seconds later, I proudly announced, I think I'll be a pediatrician. And let me tell you, my answer was very well received. Now, my grandmother's comment wasn't because she didn't respect teachers. My grandfather was a lifelong academic. And it wasn't because she wanted to live some lavish life. She was always living well beneath her means. But to her, security was everything. And in this case, that salary meant security. She and my grandfather came here to the US in the early 60s, and they were the only ones from their combined 15 siblings that came from India to America. And they carried the weight of helping to support their families back home. She didn't want me to have to struggle the way that they did. And that was their dream. But somewhere in that moment, my dream got lost. And my little 8-year-old self could see that what I wanted wasn't what others wanted for me. And when I aligned my goal to what they wanted for me, I saw that look of pride in everyone's faces. So I assessed what everyone else wanted to hear, and I made an adjustment. And that adjustment earned me acceptance and validation and recognition, that connection that every little kid wants. But what it cost me was the disconnection from myself and what really mattered to me. And to be honest, that probably wasn't the first time that I had made an adjustment like that, kind of moving away from my own needs toward what everyone else valued. And it definitely wasn't the last time that I made an adjustment like that. Because without even knowing, I took this message in and I internalized this belief that when I'm doing things that others value, I'm seen. And this is how I started to take work too personally, because when I felt seen, I felt safe. So this is the first step for all of us. We have to explore those beliefs that we've formed and the messages that we've internalized that cause us to confuse what we do with who we are. Sometimes these beliefs are unconscious and they're kind of so programmed into us that we don't even know that they're there. And as you can see from my story, they form in our very early years, from our upbringing, from cultures, from our traumas that we experience, and even from our inborn personality traits. And so why does this matter in a conversation about bringing purpose into your work? These internal beliefs and messages lead us to these patterns of behavior like people pleasing or overthinking or trying to do it all without having the awareness of why we feel so compelled to fall into these same patterns over and over again. And there's a great body of research that shows that burnout isn't only about physically overworking, but it shows up as emotional drain or mental drain, which these types of behaviors are a huge contributor to. So as we deny our needs through people pleasing, or we stress ourselves out over things that we can't control, or we doubt ourselves and we overthink things, we're draining our own energy, which often results in burnout. But if we can bring awareness to these unconscious beliefs, if we can make them conscious beliefs and understand maybe where they came from, we can start to shift these behavioral patterns that don't serve us. And so I want you to start by asking yourself, what am I making work mean about me? When you take on that extra project because you feel like you can't let anyone down, or maybe you get some critical feedback and you swirl on it for days and fixate, are you making it mean something about who you are? Are you making it mean something about your identity or your worth as a person? And is there a moment or moments in your early years where you can see where you might have made an adjustment, kind of like I did, because it was something that maybe you needed to do at the time to get what you needed? So we're going to go just a bit deeper and actually explore those beliefs that might be just beneath the surface of your awareness. I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pen if you have one in front of you and write down, it's not okay to ... Now, in my coaching practice, I often use this framework called the Enneagram as a tool for developing clients' self-awareness or improving teams' ability to collaborate effectively with each other. And it's a framework that can help us identify our personality patterns. And it goes all the way back to those childhood beliefs for each of the 9 Enneagram types. And it helps enlighten us to where we may have picked up a belief that we have internalized. And so there are 9 core childhood beliefs from these 9 Enneagram types. But even if you don't know anything about this tool or you're not interested at all, that's totally okay. You can still participate in this exercise. I want you to go through this list and just jot down any of these phrases that feel like they might be true for you. Maybe some of these feel like a belief that young you might have internalized. Okay. So once you have 1 or 2 jotted down, here's what we're going to do next. We're going to examine a few of these kind of draining behaviors that might be resulting from that internalized belief. For example, if I took on the belief that it's not okay to make mistakes, something in my childhood taught me that that wasn't something that I could do and be okay. I might be wasting a lot of time, mental energy, physical energy, stuck in this cycle of perfectionism, always trying to get everything to be 100% perfect. Or I might begin to believe, if I took on this belief that I can't trust others, I might find myself taking on too much work, maybe controlling what others are doing, maybe even micromanaging them. What are the behaviors that might result from any of those beliefs that you wrote down that might have resonated with you? For me, the beliefs that I formed told me that I needed to be valuable and successful to be seen and accepted by others. And in order to do that, I had to be what other people valued and saw as successful. So that had me becoming an overachiever and a people pleaser and often an overthinker. But in the end, I was being seen for something that wasn't true to me anyway. And I was draining a lot of energy chasing goals that weren't mine. And now, a few years after that moment where I announced I was going to become a pediatrician, I actually wrote my 6th grade term paper on early childhood development. But I did not go on to pursue becoming a doctor. That goal quickly got traded out for something a little bit more practical. What I did do was I attended one of the best business schools in the country on a full ride scholarship. And I graduated with honors and I took a job at a Fortune 50 company where I climbed the corporate ladder. But over time, that same pattern returned. Doing the things that other people saw as success instead of really checking in with myself about what I really wanted. And I got more and more disconnected from the things that mattered to me. And in the summer of 2019, I found myself no longer wanting to do the things that I loved outside of work. And every Monday, I woke up with that feeling of dread. I felt so unmotivated. I was burned out. years of succeeding at something that I didn't really care about left my emotional energy bucket empty. And I could barely recognize myself. I knew something had to change. So, with some planning and some responsible financial management, I quit my job and I started what would become a 7-month sabbatical. It was supposed to be 4, and I was having too good of a time. I had to stay. And the 7-month sabbatical was one where I had no goals other than to do the things that really drew me in or interested me or excited me. And during this time, I rediscovered my love of learning and growth, and I built so many new connections. And these were the things that fueled me. And looking back, I can see how those two things that matter so much to me, personal growth and connection with other people, had been so missing completely from that last corporate job that I quit. And there's no wonder that I felt so empty in those moments. So here's the next step. We've explored the beliefs that we took on at an early age, and we've examined the behaviors that might be draining us as a result of those beliefs. And now we have to figure out what it is that fills our buckets, just like learning new things and developing myself and building community with new people did for me. We need to infuse into our work these things that really fill us up. So here's what we're focused on now. How can I bring more of myself into the work that I do? This gives us that drive when we're working on things we care about in ways that actually work for us and using the talents that come really easily to us. This is making our work more purposeful. And when we can do this, we experience a lot less burnout. We're actually more productive, and we can excel at the work that we're doing. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning about sustainable success. And so our first step here is to identify our talents and our motivators. And we're going to talk about 3 questions to explore that for each of you. So what makes you you? Now, for the first question, we can draw on our lived experience. Back in October, I had the honor of hosting a workshop with the dreamers that were attending 2024's Dream Camp at DreamBank. And so many of them were starting businesses that helped them solve a problem that they had struggled through. They were building what they had needed but didn't have to make this path forward easier for the people that would come next. And so you can think about what products or resources or tools or knowledge do you wish that you had? What lived experience do you have that gives you an expertise in an area? That could be a really great source of finding purposeful work or ways that we can derive purpose in the jobs that we do. So the next question is, what do you do effortlessly well? And this is sometimes the hardest question to answer because we live in our own brains and our own bodies 24/7. And it's actually really hard to realize when we're great at something when it comes easily to us. When I was on that 7-month sabbatical, I had a really cool experience of seeing my talents reflected back to me through other people. I bonded with these kind of relative strangers. And as we were planning a weekend trip to go off to some islands in Bali, they were telling me how much they appreciated my planning skills, particularly my ability to consider everybody's needs in the planning process and my organization and attention to detail. And they kept telling me, you should make this a business. You're so good at it. And the funny thing is, in my head, I thought everyone could do this. So why would anyone pay for it? But that wasn't actually true. A lot of people can't do it well, and certainly not with the limited effort that I had to put in. It's not as easy for everybody to do. So what is it that comes easy to you? And you may have some ideas now, but I would also encourage you to ask the people around you that know you best. You'll be surprised what they might reflect back to you that you maybe never named for yourself. Because again, when it's easy for us, we kind of take it for granted, but that can be a source of understanding those innate talents that we have. And then if we can incorporate those into our work, we get a lot more impact for the effort that we put in. Now, the last of these 3 questions to explore is, what matters most to you? So what really matters to me, and I mentioned those 2 things that I had been missing from my job that led me to burnout, this personal growth and this deep human connection that as a coach and a facilitator and a speaker, I get to have so much of in my current business, but those things were missing from that job where I ended up burned out. And these are what I would consider like core values or motivators for me. So to reflect on yours, you can consider, if your calendar was wiped totally clean, what would you spend your time doing? Or what would you spend your time discovering? Or without any of the roles that you play for other people in your life, at your job, in your family, what are you drawn to outside of the things you do for other people? Or what qualities do you embody when no one is looking? If there were no one around and nothing on your calendar, what would you do? These are really good windows into what you value and what really drives you. Now, I have these 3 questions up here, but I will say identifying your talents and your motivators can be a process. It's definitely not a one and done exercise. And this is something that you should continue to explore for your entire life. But if you might grab 1 or 2 things that felt true for you as we went through these questions, you can start to bring them into your work. So once you've identified a couple of things that we can work with here, it's time to put it into action. So this is where we talk about how do we incorporate what we love into the work that we do. So there's this thing called job crafting, and it's a study that's been going on for years, and it's really all about how can we change our jobs, even if we are doing a role that is a box on an org chart in a big corporate organization. How can we make some small shifts to make our work better for us? And you can begin to craft your work in big ways or in small ways. Now, the biggest way that you can do this is start a business, which may be a dream that some of you have. And maybe you're still a few years away from that still, and that's okay. Or maybe starting your own business isn't something you ever want to do. You can craft your work even when you work in a large corporation. So there are a couple of ways to craft your work, starting with what you do, the actual tasks that you're doing. This could look like moving into a new field, having a career pivot like I did. It could be starting a business or moving into a different division in your company. And those are all pretty big ways to craft your work by changing the actual tasks that you're doing every day. But you can also volunteer for development opportunities at your company. Maybe there's different organizations within your company or additional responsibilities at work that actually would be things that you would really enjoy. For example, if you really want to learn more about what it might be like to be in a different function, is there a cross collaborative project that's going on that can be part of your work plan? And you would get exposure to those people and maybe do some of those tasks that that function does. Now, the next thing is crafting the process of your work. So this looks like changing how you do something or who you do it with. This could be turning a solo task into a collaborative one. I've noticed for me, a lot of times in my business, I'm doing workshops and talks solo. But when I have the opportunity to collaborate with a friend and build something together, I get so much energy back from it. So how can I turn some of my solo tasks into collaborative ones? So that could be an option if you're really driven by that connection and collaboration like I am. Could be reaching out to other departments to learn something new while you're executing a project, or it could be changing the way that you go about something. Maybe there's a task that always makes you feel bad because you just don't feel very competent at it. You could change how you do that task by maybe searching out a training that might help you fill some gaps, or you could implement a new system to do part of the work in a different way. And I think you're probably picking up on this, but none of this is revolutionary thinking. I'm not really saying anything that maybe you couldn't just come up with on your own, but often, especially when we work in organizations, we don't feel like we have permission to ask for the things that we need to make our job more enjoyable. Or maybe we assume that this was the process to do this thing that I got trained on. And so I just always am going to have to do it that way. But take this as your permission to say, let me just ask. Maybe I'm struggling through this thing for no reason. We have a lot more autonomy than we usually think we do. And if you're able to frame a request to your manager or your team in a way that shows them the benefit to them or the benefit to the business, because when we can work our way, it's almost always better for our results and productivity. When we can frame it that way, there's often a yes at the end of that ask. Okay, so the last way that we can craft our job is mindset crafting. We can change how we perceive our work. And this one's a little bit harder to conceptualize, but this is simply changing the way that we think about our work. As an example, a receptionist can craft their mindset about their work by either seeing their job as, I check people in and I get them name tags, or they can see their job as, I represent the brand of this company and I'm the first person that visitors encounter. They think about the role as being an ambassador for the company and ensuring they provide a welcoming experience. They will definitely have a better chance of feeling a sense of purpose and accomplishment in their day. And often things that seem tactical can play a much more strategic role than we know. Sometimes it's helpful to ask others to bring you into the big picture of how your role fits into the broader objectives of a company. Or maybe connecting with the people that are actually impacted the most by the work that you do can help you see what is that outcome of all of this effort that you're putting in. I had a client who worked at a pharma company, and they would bring in patients whose lives had been changed by the drugs that they were working on. And that connection to the outcomes of their work was something that really inspired them and motivated them and energized them, because instead of working away in a lab and never seeing the outcome of that work, they were able to really see the human that it impacted. And so this is just a mindset shift. Their job didn't change at all, but something changed in the way that she saw it. Okay, so we're going to recap, and I have a couple of things to leave you all with. But first, what we need to do to really stop making work so personal and start making it more purposeful is to explore those beliefs that we've internalized. What is the thing that you maybe needed to do when you were a little person? And that same truth isn't just present in your adult life. And then that belief that you might be hanging on to, what are the behaviors that might be draining your energy? Upholding that belief internally. So making those beliefs conscious, bringing awareness to them, and then examining what is the result of that belief and how am I draining my energy, whether it's physically, mentally, or emotionally. Identifying those things and starting to shift those behaviors. And then identifying your talents and your motivators, the things that make you you, what comes really naturally to you that is easeful and you can make a big impact with less effort. And what are the things that motivate you? What are your values? What are the things that really matter? And then once we've done all that, we incorporate it into the work that we're doing. So bringing what you love, bringing more of yourself into what you do in ways where you can task craft, mindset craft, or process. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of things, a few parting thoughts, and I have a resource that you all can download to help you along the way. But a couple of things I would say. We covered a lot. We went deep down into our childhood beliefs and talked about behavioral patterns and talked about what are your talents that you came into this world with that you can really leverage and harness. And how do you start making an action plan and changing the work that you do? So that was a lot to cover in 30 minutes. And so I just want to remind everybody, just start right where you are. What is one thing that might be draining you today in your job? And what is the very small shift that you might be able to make that task more enjoyable, better aligned with how you like to work? Maybe there's an ask you can make, advocate for your needs or the way that you can deliver better results if X, Y, or Z changes. And then embrace experimentation, because here's the thing, we are always growing and evolving, and our talents may come to light in different roles and spaces. And maybe something that you thought really mattered to you, you go and shift a little bit of your job to incorporate more of that, and it actually isn't doing the trick. So think about this as an experimentation. Change one thing and observe. And what observation means is pay attention to your energy. How do you feel? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel energized? Do you feel less drained than you did before? Run an experiment, measure it, see how you're feeling, and then maybe try another one. So we're going to take some questions here, but I also want to leave everybody with a resource because, again, we covered a lot, and I have a podcast. It's called Working Your Way, and I'll have guests on. We'll talk about their career story and how they've navigated their career path to get to a place that's really authentic to them. But we also have some kind of subject matter episodes about career development or exploring your past and understanding how that impacts your work habits. And so the resource guide that you can use the QR code and send me your email, and you'll get that in the next hour or so. But it's a 3-page guide. I actually just printed it out, and it's got a bunch of different podcast episodes categorized to go through these 4 buckets of exploring your beliefs, examining your behaviors, identifying what makes you you and the talents and motivators, and incorporating them into your work. So that resource guide is there. The podcast episodes always have some discussion, but then there's always a tool, a link, a question to reflect on. So there's lots of both reflection and little things and tools that you can take to really put some things into action. So I think with that, we're going to open up for some questions, and I'll leave this QR code up there for a couple more minutes.
Perfect. Okay, yeah. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat and we will get to those. I know you just to recap, we did have one question about how to obtain the resources. It sounds like they can just scan the QR code and that will take them to everything they need, or go to your website. You have the information there as well, and your podcast.
Yeah, and if you use the phone on your camera on your screen, or you can take a screenshot of it later and take a picture. But if you have any issues, just let me know. My website's there. You can get a hold of me. I'm not that hard to find. And I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Awesome. Okay, I did see one question come through. What recommendations would you offer to someone who is money driven?
Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, here's the thing. I think what I would ask, because money is a conduit to something. So we typically don't want money just to like put it in our mattress and hold on to it. So what is money affording you? Is it nice things, which by the way is totally fine. If anyone is into astrology, I'm a Taurus moon. I like fancy things. But also maybe money is a conduit to flexibility in your schedule. Maybe it's a conduit to freedom. Maybe it's a conduit to less stress or leaving a legacy for your children or your family. So I would ask you, what is it that money would bring you? And that might help you see what is the value underneath that might be something that you can incorporate. And to be fair, we should all be paid fairly for our work. And so that's kind of a given here that, we need to earn money for the work that we're doing. And sometimes there's something else that if that's what we want, maybe there's something else that it gets us.
I love that. Yeah, it's important to think and just dig a little deeper there. Perfect. So the next thing I want to ask you is kind of a traditional DreamBank tradition where we ask our speakers a two-part question. The first one is, what dream are you currently pursuing? And then the second, what is one piece of advice you would offer to someone who is pursuing a dream right now?
Okay, what dream am I currently pursuing? A professional dream that I have is to do a TEDx talk. So to get on a TEDx stage and do that talk, and in order to do that, I need to get clear on my perspective and what I want to say. So there's that piece, but that's a big one. And then another professional one is trying to get to 100 episodes on my podcast. I think we just launched 62 or 61. So those are professional dreams. And then I know you asked for one, but I think personally for me is traveling a lot more this year. Being a relatively new business owner, money is inconsistent. And so for me, it's about having that change of scenery and doing that more, because it was something that was a really big part of my life before I started my business, and I want to get back to that.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you.
And then advice, I think it might be those things that I had at the end. Start small. What is like, I think, and I suffer from this, where like something can feel so big that it's overwhelming to get started on it. I like to break things down into smaller pieces. And so maybe that's like, what is the one first step that you can take towards that thing?
Let's see, we have another question here. How can you help someone who is an older adult who has stopped dreaming, doing a job that they have no passion for?
Yeah, I think that's very relatable. If it's possible to, I think this is something that, again, I experience this, where it's like, when I don't have a lot of good things in the bucket, I feel very gray, very kind of like middle of the road. And so my motivation, if you think about it in buckets, right, of mental energy, physical energy, and emotional energy, when we're not doing things that excite us and light us up and bring us those highs, the joy, everything can just feel very kind of boring and middle of the road. And so what can you put in your bucket that actually might help lift the energy and get you back to having kind of a spark or an inspiration? We may feel drained. It's kind of one of those like fake it till you make it, like start doing some fun things and then the energy follows. But it's hard to see that before we start experiencing the lift in energy.
This next question, I feel like it kind of similar to the last, but a little bit different. What would be your advice for someone who feels as if they don't know what they enjoy or want, even when they're trying to tune into their energy?
Yeah. Experiment, try a couple things. One of the episodes, the podcast episodes in the resource guide is about how do I take ownership over my career development? And what we talk about in there is design thinking. So it's like, how can you start to run little experiments in your life or in your career and get some data, right? It's like, I think we could sit in a room and say like, reading sounds boring, or, I don't know, ceramics class, or I just can't come up with ideas. It's like, how do we start small and just try something, collect the data, see if you liked it, you didn't, move on to the next thing.
Love that. All right, we will do one more question here. Sometimes we have to be our own cheerleader. What is your best advice to quiet the mind enough to do that?
One little kind of exercise, and this comes from the kind of school of mindful self-compassion, is thinking about how you would speak to a friend or a loved one if we have that kind of internal narrative that like feels kind of negative, maybe it's kind of critical of us. How would you, if you were having a friend tell you all the things that you're telling yourself in your head, what would you say to them? How would you change that narrative? Because oftentimes we might beat ourselves up over things or be extra critical of ourselves instead of kind of hyping ourselves up, but we would absolutely do that for a friend, a coworker, a neighbor, whatever. So one thing is just identifying that voice, understanding maybe where it came from, and if there's some healing that can be done around that, but also just like shift it and start to talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend.
I love that. It makes me think of when you said in the presentation, ask other people, like, what do you do effortlessly, So I think that's really important call out.
Yeah. The other thing that I would say, and this was really for the question before, when we're just feeling that like downness. I mean, Jenna and I just talked about this. The winter time is naturally lending itself to this slowing down, but sometimes that can just feel very blah, can feel heavy, a little dark at times. And so I've always found that it's really helpful to remember that everything is cyclical, because when I'm in those down moments, it feels like this is how my whole life is going to be forever. And it always comes back around, but I forget that when I'm in it. So reminding yourself that we do go through these cycles and that you won't always feel this way. And hopefully that might help a little bit.
All right, Sandhya, thank you so much for sharing your time and insights with us today. This was such a inspiring session. And to all who joined us for this session, thank you for being here. You can learn more about DreamBank's free upcoming programming at amfam.com/DreamBank and by connecting with us on our social channels. And if you're interested in revisiting this event or exploring past ones, our YouTube channel is the place to be. On behalf of the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, we look forward to hosting you again soon. Until then, keep dreaming fearlessly. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.